Yes, thank you very much, Ed. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us tonight on our presentation on faith, justice, and housing. I would like to especially thank Christine Dinsmore for arranging this. And on this cold, snowy day, I would especially like to thank Zoom for existing. So let's get started by me introducing tonight's speaker, Rashida Tyler. Thank you, Rashida, for joining us tonight with her presentation on faith, justice, and housing. We are happy to welcome this multi-hyphenate success. To say that Rashida Tyler is a housing advocate is an understatement. Rashida Tyler serves as the Deputy Executive Director of the New York State Council of Churches and as the Project Manager for the Interfaith Affordable Housing Collaborative. She is also the co-founder of the Real Kingston Tenants Union and the founder of the Ulster County Coalition for Housing Justice, which empowers tenants and advocates for housing justice throughout Ulster County. Her list of accomplishments, achievements, and positions goes on and on and on. When I read her bio, I thought this can't all be one person. Her bio would be extensive and impressive if shared amongst three people, but amazingly, all of the titles and work that goes into them is embodied by one person, Rashida. Rashida is a dynamo. And just in case she doesn't seem busy enough, she is also a well-rounded person. She is an avid and active figure skater. She grew up skating and, in fact, she still goes to the rink these days. Rashida doesn't cook much, but she can make a nice, simple breakfast. She prefers a good dinner as it marks the time to wind down and relax. And if you want to get on her good side, serve her a nice plate of mac and cheese, one of her favorite dishes. And lastly, Rashida loves classic movies. And by classics, I don't mean Titanic. Go back further. I don't mean the Goonies or the Gremlins. We're reaching all the way back to black and white movies. Think Ginger Rogers. We are honored to have this bright star in our presence to provide us with more insight on this amazingly timely issue of affordable housing and fair housing. Please welcome our housing expert, Rashida Tyler.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Molly. That was a wonderful introduction. And I think it really surprises people when I love those like really old movies and I'll know all these titles. People are like, what? I'm like, yes, like 1939, 1940s. I'm watching those movies. So
Wow.
very cool.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Ed, would you pass control to Rashida and we'll get started.
So first, I want to say thank you very much to the NAACP of Southern Ulster County for inviting me. This is such an honor. I'm honored as always to be with Maud Bruce, your president, also another member of the AME Zion Church. Very proud to represent and be in the same space with Christine Dinsmore and so many people who are just again doing this day in and day out to help create justice and fight for justice in Ulster County. So thank you so much for your work. Okay, so I'm going to begin the presentation, and do remind me again just how much time I have. About 20 minutes.
25 minutes.
25 minutes.
If
Okay, I will.
If you need more, you can take more. Okay.
Thank you so much. All right, let me see. I'm gonna go to the presentation mode. Okay. And share screen. So, okay.
Yeah, we got it.
Let me move this bar to the side and I'll minimize. There we go. Okay, so as Molly said, today's presentation is really on faith, justice, and housing. And I really want to say this as faith is the underpinning of the fight for justice and for housing, as it was for Dr. King and so many people who came out of the church, particularly the Black church, to fight for justice. It's because we're called to by our faith. Not other motivations, things come and go, but if you're fighting for the right reasons, you're going to stay in that fight. So these photos are actually from a few years ago when we were fighting to get housing really put on the map in Ulster County as an issue. So this is 2018, 2019, right when the Kingston Tenants Union was forming. This was one of our first public events that we were able to do outside in the warm. And this was for the picture on the right with the crowd was really from the Kingstonian. That was a project being proposed in Uptown Kingston that at first only had luxury housing developments. But after this meeting, they quickly added some affordable housing to that mixture. And I'll explain a little bit more about why that happened a little later. But as Molly mentioned, I am the Deputy Executive Director of the New York State Council of Churches and the project manager of the Interfaith Affordable Housing Collaborative. And again, both positions we are statewide, so we're all throughout New York State, but really the seed came from Ulster County. So again, these are just some photos from the fight here in Ulster County and beyond to really get housing put on the map, because up to 2018, 2019, housing issues are really dealt with on an individual basis, and there wasn't very much attention paid to it on a systemic level. So we had to galvanize the community to come out and to get involved, and that's what we did. We had throughout the years a number of community members who helped advocate and really draw attention to each and every single demand that was necessary for housing here in Ulster County. So I really want to start with, and I'm preaching to the choir here because I think we all know what having housing means. It means safety, it means shelter, it means protection, warmth. It's also a social determinant of health, meaning that when you're housed and you have, a health issue that comes up, your outcome is better. It's more likely that you're going to recover if you have housing than if you do not. I always think back to a couple, and I still stay in contact with them today. And they were unhoused. And this is in, I'm going to say right at 2020, around the pandemic. And they were a couple, and the man, he had a heart attack, and he had a brain aneurysm, a stroke suffered shortly thereafter, and he was released from the hospital to the street. He had nowhere to go. He had been made homeless because he had been living with his aunt, who herself was evicted by a landlord who was selling the property and didn't want to go through the proper channels and had the building inspector come in and condemn the property. So they were made suddenly homeless. And one of the other things that impacted their ability to find housing was that he had received a sanction. DSS had actually sent a notice to him to send in paperwork while he was in the hospital, and he was not able to comply, and so he had a 120-day sanction. So I had to go to, actually it was myself and another organizer went to DSS, and we had to argue with them to get the sanction lifted. And then once the sanction was lifted, it was okay. Well, who will take him? Because they're going to say the warming center, which is something that happens often during the winter. If they can't place anyone anywhere else, they'll send them to the warming center. But he had multiple health conditions that made that a bad choice. So we eventually ended up getting him placed in a motel. And he stayed there actually for almost 2 years throughout the pandemic, until we linked him up with People USA, and he and his partner were able to find housing. And now going on 2.5 years, they are still housed. And his health outcome has been so much better. His partner was having some other health issues as a result of being unsheltered, and becoming sheltered allowed them to find stability. And they're still together, and they're thriving today. So that's a short story, one of the short stories of people recovering when they have housing. But again, I think we all know the value of housing. So I can move on from this to say that unfortunately, that's not something that many New Yorkers have. It's a conservative estimate that at least 100,000 New Yorkers are unhoused. Now, this number is for New York City alone. Ulster County, beyond, the numbers are not really aggregated in the same way. So it's very difficult to find a static number of exactly how many people in New York State are homeless. So you look at the number of 100,000, that's specifically talking about New York City. And this particular statue is outside of St. Francis of Assisi, which is one of the only major churches in New York City that helps and has continuously helped the unhoused for basically to have access to facilities that other establishments, shut people out of, such as restrooms and things like that. So in Ulster County, because I do believe in centering the crisis here at home and seeing how it's playing out in the county, the households, basically, this is from the the continuum of care, and it shows the number of people who were unhoused or were helped by emergency housing in Ulster County in 2022, which is the most recent year the study was available for. So here we can see that there was a total of 1,082 people who received help in either emergency or transitional housing. And then there's also 189 who have received help in supportive housing and 76 in rapid rehousing. And again, these numbers are conservative because there's a number of people who do not go into the system or who have been barred from the system by sanctions and other means. And either they self-exclude or they are excluded. And so there's also in Ulster County a racial dynamic, as there is statewide and across the nation, and frankly also globally, to the housing crisis. So we can see that of the total households helped, 926, 23% were African American. So if you think about the percentage of African Americans in Ulster County total, I think we're around 10% to 13% around for the whole county. This number is astronomical, and it shows that it's outpacing or more than double, the statistical what it should be for our population size. And then the same for Black and brown people, so the Latino population as well. I think that this is something that doesn't get enough attention in Ulster County, or for that matter, statewide, the racial dynamic and the racial impact of the housing crisis. Okay, and so we have a total of about 36,000 total renters here in Ulster County, and we rank about 8th in the state for affordability. So it's about 27.79% of our renter households are severely burdened. So that means paying 50% of their rental income, their income to rent. And so that means that, so many things are unaffordable for these households. And to be honest with you, this is from the Ulster County Housing Survey, which was not a complete survey. It surveyed about 202 households, and it's a self-response study. So this number could be much, much higher. Hey, and the wage gap by county. So this is actually from a Pattern for Progress study called Out of Reach, Housing Out of Reach, which was actually just released. And it really breaks down the gap between wages and rental housing here in Ulster County. So one of the main reasons that we're having this housing crisis is that housing has become unaffordable. It has become, there's less stock available, so there's vacancy issues. And then there's a third issue as well, which I'll get into as to why we're also having this housing crisis. In Ulster County, the wage is about $14.50. However, to actually afford a one-bedroom apartment, you're going to need about $22.21. And if you want to have a two-bedroom apartment, you're going to need $28.81. A lot of jobs around here are definitely not paying that. And if we look at the annual wage gap in Ulster County, the average renter makes about $30,167. But to actually afford a one bedroom, you're going to need $46,200. And to afford a two bedroom, $59,920. So we can see that our wages are not keeping pace with our rents. This is something, again, that has been talked about, but again, seeing it here and laid out is very jarring. But we can also see that this is leading to other problems, which I'll speak about a little bit later. So our vacancy rate, which is about 2.84% for the county. Now, this is only in non-subsidized housing. As I said, there are some issues with the Ulster County Rental Housing Survey. And so it's judged about 2.84%. That number has actually decreased from 2018. But there are pockets and places in the county where the vacancy rate is near zero. And then if we factor in subsidized housing as well, that number would plummet even more. So we can clearly see there's a vacancy problem. And that, again, 47% of Ulster County renters are cost burdened. So that means paying over 30% of their income to rent. And then there's another almost 30% that are paying over 50% of their rent to income, or their income to rent. And so the study shows, and there have been reports, that there's actually a decrease in cost burden on residents, on renters, but this isn't necessarily taking into account the number of people who've been priced out of the county. So there's a swap going on or happening where there are higher wage individuals who are moving here who've been priced out of other areas, and they're taking the place of people who've been priced out of Ulster County. And so it appears that the numbers are stabilizing, but really it's not capturing the people who have left. A few days ago, where the alarm was sounded, was that 100,000 people have left New York State. And I guarantee the income breakdown of the people who left is they're mostly lower income and people who were priced out of New York State. Hey, and the vacancy rate overall, this is just, you can see it over the years where it's a little dipsy doodle here. The best year was 2014, apparently, but we can see that it's been trending on the lower side as of the last 2 to 3 years. Okay, so the kind of third source of the housing crisis. So we have affordability, where our wages are not keeping pace with the rental stock, rental prices. And we also have where the vacancy, there's not enough places available. But the third issue that's, you know, at the root of the crisis is a lack of will. And the lack of will is actually the most problematic. You have NIMBYism. This is where, of course, you have where neighbors are like, I don't want this project in my backyard. I don't want this project next to me. Or sure, I believe people should have housing, but just not there or there or there or there. So that NIMBYism becomes very problematic when you're actually coming up with these great concepts for housing, but you encounter this pushback or resistance. In the last few years, there's been a trend toward YIMBYism, or yes in my backyard, finding out what communities do want and then trying to work with that. But what I found in my experience from going around the state is communities that want the housing that certain communities want in their backyard is not necessarily what's needed in their backyard. So I'll take one community on Long Island. They actually, there's a church and they want to build housing, but the town doesn't want any multifamily units being built because they believe that that will actually bring in an undesirable class of people for the town. So they're only gearing towards or trying to grant permission for single family homes to be developed, affordable single family homes, which again, for the section of Long Island would be cost prohibitive, probably even at the affordable level for many people. And so there's ways that they throw up blocks around zoning to actually prevent those housing projects from being constructed. And so that's rooted in a bias against the poor and the unhoused. So we in America come from these roots of Calvinism and rugged individualism, legendary. I mean, to be honest with you, those tropes didn't really exist. Of the rugged individual, we can see that, you know, to even establish a colony here, help was needed from many different sources. And colonialism was not, you know, people individually on their own. It was a system. So that kind of mentality has been educated into many people. And so thus, when they see someone who is experiencing housing insecurity, they really feel, oh, that's your fault. You didn't do something right along the way. And so there's this division between the deserving and the undeserving poor. And so that results in cherry picking of populations, which is very problematic in housing policy today, where we're going to provide homes for veterans, we're going to provide homes for teachers, we're going to provide homes for police officers, we're going to provide homes for firefighters, all these discrete different populations. But when it comes to just helping a person who is homeless, that almost doesn't exist, particularly if you are a single adult or a single adult male. There is not a lot of housing options available for you. And so that is rooted in the undeserving poor. There's actually a book called The Undeserving Poor that goes into this a little bit more. But I think this cherry picking of populations is something that has very much exacerbated our housing crisis. And then there is a lack or intentional lack of knowledge about homelessness. So people will turn a blind eye about the housing crisis. Well, if you can't afford to live here, go move somewhere else you can't afford. You know, this kind of mentality of not wanting to address a problem and by, you know, again, blaming the individual and keeping themselves or keeping a population or the story, the narrative away from the mainstream so people can't understand it better. And I think here in Ulster County, our media does not cover homelessness the way other places do. Ulster County is really notorious for not actually doing these stories outside of Thanksgiving and Christmas on the housing crisis. Okay, so I'm gonna go to the next term. So what are some solutions? So I've talked a lot about problems, and I just want to give a look at some of the solutions that are out there. The solutions really can fall into three different categories: to create new affordable housing, which I'll go into and talk a little bit about, the Interfaith Affordable Housing Collaborative and Partnership for Faith-Based and Community Development. You can prevent displacement. So laws that are being proposed, or policies that are being proposed, include protecting the right to shelter, the right to counsel, housing access vouchers, which I'll go into a little bit more, but then also protecting the assets and maintaining the assets that we do have, such as public housing. I'll double back for the discussion on right to shelter and right to counsel, and delve into a little bit more about the faith-based housing development. I actually started at this position. I'll be here 1 year tomorrow. But I have really honestly been around the state and spoken to many communities that are grappling with some of the same issues Ulster County is. And there are many congregations in these communities that want to help. Churches are some of the biggest landowners and landholders in the world. The Catholic Church is the largest landholder in the world. If you go into New York State, I think that holds true as well. And then there are other religious institutions. So faith property is a tremendous portion of the property that is out there. And there is a considerable interest in the faith community to use that property to benefit the community. However, the development process with churches can be problematic. Number one, there are many congregations who have to get their projects approved by the Attorney General before they can even move forward and say, start to develop. What we do is we help those congregations clear any issues so that they can go before the Attorney General and say, I've had this pre-development education and I would like to develop, and be able to show they're not being taken advantage of. Because unfortunately, that has happened to a lot of different faith organizations that want to develop. A developer will come along and say, we want to do this, but the church may again get taken advantage of in the process. There could be a ground lease deal where the ground lease stops actually becoming profitable after a certain amount of time, and then it becomes a liability. So we again help iron out many of those things before they happen. So the Interfaith Affordable Housing Collaborative is a collaboration between the New York State Council of Churches, Bricks and Mortals, and the Interfaith Assembly on Housing and Homelessness. And so the partnership really advises faith-based institutions. So we're, work with Christians, Muslims, Jewish populations. We work with anyone of people of all faiths to do mission-driven real estate. And we really help around education, and then fighting to help create policies that will facilitate faith-based organizations building. So that includes looking at zoning and comprehensive plans, budgeting, financing, and so forth. Right now, we're working on a bill called the Faith-Based Affordable Housing Act. And that was introduced just last month. And it's in the Assembly and sponsored in the Assembly by by Assemblyman Andrew Cunningham, and in the Senate by Andrew Gennardis. I totally murdered his name, but you'll find the bill there. And so basically what this says is that churches outside of New York City will be able to build up to 3 stories as of right. So that means that instead of going through the rigmarole of going to the municipality that might be like, no, we don't want to build, a church can say, we would like to build for our community up to 3 stories, affordable housing, and you would be able to do that as of right. In New York City, that would be 55 stories or 5 stories. So basically, we're trying to make it so that congregations have more options to help their community, and their hands are not tied. And we're funded by this work from Trinity Church Wall Street, which helps us to be able to provide funding to churches, so or to faith-based organizations. So if you come to us, we have a number of different services that are offered free of charge. And we can provide up to a $30,000 refundable or forgivable loan to a church. So if you develop within 5 years, there's a repayment schedule. If you do not develop within 5 years, so your church or organization is still considering or not sure of the project, then you do not have to repay the loan. And so we operate, again, 2 different organizations in New York State. We are the Interfaith Affordable Housing Collaborative, and we assist churches all throughout the state. In New York City, I'll just go back, because we're the Partnership for Faith-Based Housing and Community Development. So we advise faith-based organizations on all of their housing options and non-housing options. So if you want to build a community center or any type of other community good, assistance would be available as well. Okay, and so we do things like funding and referring to other organizations that can help your organization learn more and understand more about your property. We do trainings, one-on-one consultations, and we help you evaluate the needs of your community, so that when you do propose a project, it's something that's in line with the community's needs. But we also do things like making sure you know the property that you own. I cannot tell you how big of an issue it is that churches have property that they don't know that they own, and or may think they own it, and they don't. So we help ascertain ownership and title, and then also help to refine within the congregation what you want to do. We basically put the faith-based organization in the driver's seat. So you put all of what you want to do into an RFP with a pre-development coordinator that is paid for by the grant. So there's nothing out of pocket for the faith-based organization. And then once you know what you want to do, you put that into an RFP and you recruit the developer. So the developers come in and they look at your RFP and they decide whether they can work with what you want or not. And so we've really flipped the switch kind of on the development process. And so this just pretty much sums up what I said. We again help with planning and every phase all the way up through until you work with or get a hold of your developer. Right now we have a project that's in Amsterdam, New York, and that was a result of 2 churches that merged. One was closing and the other basically was there, so they combined and utilized the parcel of one of them to build affordable housing. And so that's ongoing. And we have several churches in New York City that are also within this process of starting to work with their developers. So that's pretty much what we do in a nutshell. And again, we work across a wide geographic area in New York State, although our funding is more restricted to the New York City and New York metro area. But if you're outside of that area, what we do is we make connections with organizations that can help you. So I want to double back a little bit, and don't know how I'm doing on time. Am I out of time, Miss Molly?
No, please go ahead.
Okay. So I'm going to go through this a little more quickly, but just talk about these three bills, which the council is really getting behind, and it has been behind, for a while. The right to shelter came into being in New York State in the early 1980s as a result of a lawsuit. And until this year, there was in New York City, if you presented yourself at a shelter, they had to provide you a bed for the night. What people don't know is that ruling was for the whole state. So that was anywhere in the state. If you presented yourself as homeless to the DSS or to the Department of Social Security, social services, they had to provide shelter for you. And so this year, one of the things that has been used as an excuse to erode the right to shelter is the number of asylum seekers who are coming into New York City. We actually work with the Interfaith Center of New York because, again, we have this arm of the Interfaith Affordable Housing Collaborative, where we do the direct work and lending. And then we have the policy arm, which is the New York State Council of Churches. And so we have been working with the Interfaith Center of New York around housing policy for asylum seekers and for housing, combining the two. And so what the Adams administration did to kind of take a rock to the right to shelter was to try to erode the 60-day rule. So meaning that implement a 60-day rule, meaning that every 60 days, a family has to present themselves to the emergency housing unit, the EAU, at that point to get rehoused. So they have to move shelters every 60 days. And so that guarantee of basically you show up and you're going to be in the system getting housing has been eroded. And so many organizations down in New York City and across the state have been working to really try to re-strengthen the right to shelter. And they've been trying to drive a wedge between asylum seekers, immigrants, and people who've been chronically homeless or struggling with housing for a very long time. One of the things that they've done, and I say they, New York City, when they were selecting communities to place asylum seekers in, they did not select the communities that were most welcoming. They actually selected the communities that were not most welcoming intentionally. So like they did not place people in the city of Albany, they placed people in Colony. They didn't place people in Newburgh, they placed people in Orangeburg or just outside of Newburgh, places that were Republican mainly controlled. And so for a while, people were being used as pawns in this kind of political game. And so that triangulation is happening around the right to shelter. And so what we're trying to do as a council is really advocate for solutions that benefit everyone, regardless of immigration status. So one of those policies is also the right to counsel. The right to counsel is a bill. These are active bills in the New York State Senate and Assembly. The right to counsel says that if you receive an eviction notice, if you're going to housing court, you will be provided an attorney. Some of the biggest pushback or resistance to this bill actually comes from other legal aid providers. And so one of the main pushbacks that we've received is that there aren't enough lawyers to handle the number of cases that would result when this bill is passed. But we actually believe there are a number of ways that can be used to augment counsel, and that if properly funded, then the bill would be very successful in helping to prevent displacement. And lastly, housing access vouchers. Housing access vouchers would apply to everyone, regardless of their immigration status. And so this would provide, you would pay 30% of your income. So if you're a lower income New Yorker, you'd provide 30% to pay 30% of your income, and then the housing access voucher would make up the difference, the extra 70%. And so this bill actually had gained traction at the end of last year. And so we're just starting out this legislative session. It has yet to be seen how much traction it's gaining this year. But all three of these proposals, these policies, if they're strengthened or if they pass, would do wonders to actually stem the tide of displacement in New York State. And then also there's been a divestment from public housing since the 1970s. But lately, locally, people are really starting to feel that. In Roundout Gardens in Kingston, there's a tremendous fight happening right now where there's been a proposal to build a new 80 unit development from what were their senior housing complexes. And there are people who really fear displacement because the income level that basically they don't have to replace the same number of apartments for the same income level. So you'll have 80 units and maybe 20 of those would be affordable or for the same affordability level Roundout Gardens is right now. Now, the history behind Roundout Gardens, everybody knows that was a result of urban removal, and it was a cordoning off of people who were poor and mainly African American. But as things have it, where they placed the projects at the time, it's in now one of the most prime locations in town. And so you see this this maneuvering to try to find ways to say, well, this will be a mixed income housing development. And we can look at what happened in Chicago and in Atlanta to see that RAD has had negative impacts for people who've lived in public housing and need public housing. The number of apartments that are taken away that are for the very low income are not replaced. And the same thing is happening in New York City with NYCHA housing. So we are supporting a radical and unprecedented investment in social and public housing. So that's it. I didn't want to go too far over. I hope I didn't go too far.
You're fine. You are just fine. And we are grateful for the education. I don't think you could go over. We are just enraptured tonight. Thank you for that eye-opening presentation, Rashida. We have a healthy number of attendees on this call tonight, so we'll welcome questions from our audience in just a moment. It was interesting to see how the statistics play out in detail. I think most of us can remember when being that we were cost burdened. We used to just call it broke, but I like cost burdened a little bit better. I think we all need the reminder that none of us are that far away from being put back in that situation. One job loss, one medical emergency, and we can all quickly tumble back into a precarious housing situation. So we really appreciate your reminder, your details, and the light that you have brought on this issue. Do we have any questions from the audience? I see we'll start with Christine. Christine, please go ahead.
Thank you. Rashida, I need a call to action. Is there anything specifically that we who are not part of your organization that we could do either to support what you're doing or to make some changes in our own community around housing?
Yes, absolutely. So I would say, and I'll put her email in the chat, for work around the Roundout Gardens, I would reach out to Ann Ames with Wednesday Walks Through Black Lives. She's been leading that fight locally. And for Right to Counsel, we have Katie LaSalle from the Right to Counsel Coalition. And they will be actually holding a Right to Counsel forum in a few days, actually. So I'm going to be dropping all of these in the chat so that you have them. We have on March 18th and 19th, we have our Ecumenical and Interfaith Advocacy Day. And we are seeking to pull leaders of faith, the whole community, advocates, everyone together to go to Albany and really seek and demand changes in housing policy. Last year was a pretty bad year for housing. Nothing got done. And to be honest with you, I've been hearing murmurs of a deal that's about to happen from the legislature, but the governor has been pretty staunch that she is not going to touch things like good cause eviction. So she is flatly does not support that. And so she said didn't make very much mention of housing in her State of the State address. And so it's looking like there's going to be a stalemate again this year. And we have to find a way to break through that. So March 18th and 19th, we're going to have the Ecumenical and Interfaith Advocacy Day. If you are interested in the Interfaith Affordable Housing Collaborative, I did about maybe 5 to 6, 7 minutes of a longer presentation that we're going to be doing on actually Thursday, the 18th. We have our open house. And again, I'll put all of these links in the chat that you can join. So if you know anyone in the faith community who's interested in development, or even if you just want to learn more about the pre-development process, you're more than happy to have you join. You can also join one of our social justice working groups that we have. So each social justice working group works on an area. So I lead housing. We have Dahlia Herring, who leads our immigration work. And we have, Sister Catherine, who leads our work around environment and climate change, as well as Reverend John Paulberg. So we work on a lot of different areas. We work internationally as well on issues in India and issues in Palestine. So there's lots of ways to plug in with our work. But then we work in coalition with so many groups across the state. So the other thing is to head to our webpage, which I'm going to put in the chat, which lists all of these events. So we have an ongoing list of almost every social justice event that people send to us. We post it on our website. So it's a great place to stay up to date as well.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you very much. Okay, any other questions or comments? Penny, yes.
Yeah, that's me. Hi, everybody. Yeah, Rashida, I was wondering, I know you talked about what's happening statewide, but I wondered if there was any movement on the part of either Kingston city government or the Ulster County government. I know there's, I know there's been talk in the past about utilizing some of the spaces in Kingston and in Ulster that actually might be transformed into housing. And I wondered what the city government and the county government were doing, and if there was any way to apply pressure on them to do it better.
Right. So I'll start with the city government because I have less hope there than the county government. I think the county is making some strides, but there could always be some more applied pressure. In the city of Kingston, I have I'm very skeptical of their ability or their desire to actually implement affordable housing plans. So one of the a proposal has been for the former Chis's Hart Street property on Washington Avenue. And this is going to be a number of units, but the affordability level that they have set is 80% of AMI. Which we know AMI or area median income is a terribly inaccurate way to actually measure affordability. And basically the former residents of Chis's Hart Street are still homeless. I actually was just helping an individual the other right before Christmas, who was being evicted from a hotel that he's been in since the fire. So the people who were burned out are still homeless. And so they cannot return to this location because they don't make 80% of AMI. And there's the tongue-in-cheek kind of like, oh, it's workforce housing, which is a phrase I absolutely hate because all housing technically is workforce housing. If you're working at, Hannaford, if you're working wherever, you're working and you're part of the workforce. And so I think there's something demeaning about setting a level of affordability and saying this is workforce and everybody else is just, and so I have been really trying to get people to talk about having affordable housing and even doing 100% affordable housing, because those projects have been done and they're being done in other places, Cambridge, Massachusetts, even Poughkeepsie had a proposal for 100% affordable housing. So I think that we can have that conversation here. As for applying pressure to the mayor, there are groups that were, I know when I was leading the Kingston Tenants Union, the Real Kingston Tenants Union, we really were applying some pressure. And I think Wednesday Walks for Black Lives is continuing that. Rise Up Kingston is continuing that work. All great organizations that are working on housing. But I also have been in conversations about doing some more targeted actions, which I will, of course, send the information about when those are more organized. But I think it's time to really place a spotlight on what's not being done around affordable housing in Kingston. At the Ulster County level, a lot of promises have been made, and they were made by the previous administration, Pat Ryan. And when he left, honestly, I didn't see where the ball was picked up and carried too far. I know that there are a lot of problems around the Elizabeth Street Manor property, which was the former Elizabeth Street mansion that had another fire, just like the Chislehurst Street boarding home. And that property ran into multiple problems. There was lead, asbestos repairs that were needed. So it was going to be a lot of money on top of the initial investment to purchase the property. But I think that has been saved. That deal has been saved. And Jen's administration is working through that to try to, again, bring that project back online. And then, of course, there was the Kingston Inn, which was just converted and renovated for families. And then there's the Quality Inn, which that project is still in the pipeline and still being worked on. So there's irons in the fire at the county level, and there's hope at the county level. But one of the things, and I'll bring it back to the point of cherry picking populations. The individual I was helping who was homeless from Chislehurst Street was just down the road at the Super 8 motel, and he couldn't go to the family inn because it was only for families. So that person, he had a hernia in his chest, so he has a binding around his chest. So he has medical issues, he has a rollator, everything to get around, and they're thinking of placing him in Socrates, in Ellenville, in all of these different places. His doctors are in Kingston. The people that he relies on for shopping, all of these things are in Kingston. So, you know, having our at the county level an actual movement towards, well, how can we help everyone, would be beneficial as well. Again, I've been saying many things about re-entering some of these spats in Ulster County around housing. This is one of the things that I would take up, because it's wonderful that they renovated the Kingston Inn, but there should be spaces for particularly people who have disabilities, and trying to make space in the projects that are currently proposed for everybody. And I think that for the city of Kingston, right now, if you become unhoused, you are evicted from the city. you are placed in a hotel in Greene County and Orange County, there are no hotels that will take people who have DSS vouchers in the city of Kingston. And so that's a huge problem. But again, I think that the call to action around that is really to reach out to your elected officials and to hold them accountable, because they're elected, they ran for these positions, and we expect some action around that out of them.
Wow. Thank you, Rashida. Be sure to drop that information, those links in the chat, or you can also email them to me or Christine, and we'll pass them along to our members. I don't see any other hands raised. There's Madeline.
I'm sorry, I don't have a question. I just have a comment about something you were talking about, that wedge thing that some people try to do. And that, of course, as members of a civil rights organization, we have to make sure that we don't fall prey to that or victim to that. It happened last year, if you guys remember that case where the woman made up some story, and then a lot of GOP politicians jumped on the fact that veterans were displaced from that hotel, I think around Newburgh. And then it got people all riled up that migrants or people who were bussed up from Texas or wherever were taking the place of veterans. And that, that at the beginning just like exploded for a couple of days until of course the truth came out. And I mean, I heard people I know, saying, I can't believe they threw out veterans to let in these people from the border. And, it wasn't, first of all, it wasn't true. And then second of all, as members of a civil rights organization, as you said, we need to be protecting immigrants. We need to be protecting, refugees. We need to be protecting everybody. So, and not let people use it as a political, football.
Right. And I'll say this as, again, I think that we have to really advance it everybody. And so some circles I'm in, they're only talking about asylum seekers and immigrants. And I bring in the conversation of, well, there's also homeless people here, and we have to advocate together. So we have to, whatever spaces that we're in, we really have to pull us all together. And so if we see like Newburgh was particularly, though, that was weaponized, and it was intentional as well. And so we have to do a better job of, when we do see these things, reaching out to one another and connecting with each other, and working on these issues broadly, saying, listen, no homelessness. Absolutely zero homelessness. We should be striving for zero people homeless, not zero functional homelessness for veterans, zero functional homelessness for, said discrete population, everybody. And that when you are housed, that you are not overburdened or cost burdened. So if we pull it together, I really do think it can be done.
Very nice. Thank you. I see another raised hand. Adriana, please.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rashida, for your wonderful work. I really appreciate it. It's very, very crucial. I have a couple of questions. Over where we are and into Sullivan County, there are a lot of Hasidic communities that are coming up from the city, and they are building, but it's only for their communities. Will there be some kind of stipulation where the apartments, houses, the buildings that will be for rent will have to be to the broader community and not just to the religious group who is organizing the housing? And number two, things come and go so fast, and Christine was asking for action items, and I totally so jive with that. There are so many issues and so many things that people don't know about with regards to how people are housed or how people are, put up in shelters or in, motels. We have a number of them in Ellenville, and it's really like there's shadow people. I was helping one woman who was trafficked recently, very sweet person, and like she didn't have a cell phone. She had to take the bus to where she worked all the way up, the road. And so I'm thankful that you're on it, calling attention to the fact that people are housed in like way far out of the way places. They might not have, they might be disabled or whatever it is, have children. If you see some of these places, there's no food around for them to go shopping or anything like that. Oftentimes there's, not oftentimes, but like largely, most of the time, the motels themselves, the owners are unregulated. And so they don't have to provide the same kind of housing, quality of housing to these people because they are vulnerable people. They don't want to necessarily, they don't have as many rights. Let's just say
Right.
that. And
Yeah.
anyway, thank you. And I would, it would be great if there could be like is there some kind of like link tree or some kind of site that's checking all these boxes?
Yes. So in the chat, I put a link to our website where it has upcoming events and actions. So every action I mentioned is actually on our website. And so tomorrow, and it's by date order. So tomorrow is Right to Counsel Coalition State Evictions Forum. So that's happening tomorrow. There are, again, numerous things that are coming up in the next few days. Our open house is on the 18th. We have our advocacy day coming up. So that information is all on the website. One of the things that I want to say around, we collaborate a lot with different groups. So we will, if Right to Counsel has something coming up, if Vocal New York has something coming up, we refer out rather than trying to duplicate or reinvent the wheel. So that's why we have the thread. And so a lot of the calls to action are on the website.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Kitty Brown?
Okay, there we go. Hi, well, I'm a member. Oh gosh, I don't seem to be able to get myself on here. Oh, my hand is in the way. Hi, this has been so informative. I'm a member of the Ulster Activist Affordable Housing Committee, and I have pages of notes here. But I think what I really want to do is send them to your website. Two things that we've wondered about at our meetings. One is, and this is very much part of what you've been talking about, it just seems like churches are empty a lot of the time and I can think of several down here and up here in New Paltz. Would that be part of your interfaith church housing? I mean, would it be worth approaching them just for the actual occupancy of the building?
So I'm so glad you brought this up because I've been seeing this conversation around on forums a lot. And so there are different models that do work. So in New York City, there's Broadway Presbyterian Church, which is actually the model for asylum seeker shelters right now. So
Okay.
that church actually is a combination day center and a shelter. So in the day, it's a day center. In the evening, it's a shelter. And they have services they provide on the spot, counseling, job training, all different types
Wow.
of things. There's a lunch program. And so that is a model that I think a lot of churches could learn from. But I also know it's in New York City, right? So that's
Right.
it's always in use.
So
And
I
that's
guess my question would be, would the church itself have to fund those activities?
So
Yeah.
yes, so we as the Interfaith Affordable Housing Collaborative could help you explore the options for reutilizing your space.
Okay.
So what we would do is go through the process that we go through with you, and then
Great.
you would decide what activities you would want to do with your church or
Okay.
your building. So that is something that we do in helping revitalize
Okay.
spaces. But beyond that, the problem where a lot of churches want to provide housing, there's lights, electricity considerations, heating considerations, all
Yeah.
the other types of expenses that go along with actually providing a safe space for someone to be. And there is not government funding that's coming into religious institutions in order to do that work. New York got some federal funding with the asylum seeker program to do that. However, there were a number of restrictions, regulatory restrictions, such around sprinklers and fire safety, that actually prevented a lot of the churches from doing those, actually serving as sites of shelter. And if you follow this one case that actually just happened out west, there was a pastor who provided shelter for people in his church, and he was arrested because it was a violation of zoning laws. So
Oh,
there's lots of things that obstruct or prevent churches from being able to do that. However, we can find ways to help facilitate and make sure that a church can effectively utilize its property.
okay. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Okay, anyone else? Any comments, any opinions?
This was great.
Yes.
Yes,
Rashida, you're a gift. Thank you, Rashida.
yes, yes.
Thank you guys so much. I feel bad I left off the call, all the calls to action, but I was like, oh, I'm going over time.
Yeah, you're fine, you're fine. We have endless time for an important issue, and we really thank you for coming and bringing your knowledge and making us all a little more aware. We thought we knew, and now we know much more. So thank you very much. We are honored to have you here tonight. We appreciate you sharing everything that you know. We know that you're a resource for us now that we can tap into whenever we have a
Absolutely.
question, and we will surely invite you back. I thank everyone for attending tonight. We are okay. Well, let's everybody get out there and shovel if you haven't already done it. Otherwise, stay warm, put down some salt at least, and stay safe, and be grateful tonight for the home that you do have. Think about that tonight, okay?
Sure.
All right,
Sure.
guys.
Uh,
Good
Okay.
night,
Thank you all.
everybody.
This was
I have
so
some comments
helpful.
before we get off.
Yes.
We have some announcement, and I want to thank Rashida Tyler for coming on. Thank you so very much. We do have some announcements that we would like to make. I would like to make, and first of all, we got a lot of members that's on our meeting tonight, and I want to thank our members for coming on. And we have so many positions on our Game Changes Committee, like education, civic engagement, criminal justice, economic development, environmental, climate justice, health. And we need people that would like to come on these committee and work with one of these committee. If you would like to do so, please email our Secretary Matlin and let her know which one of these game changes that you would like to participate in, because we do need more help on these committee. We need at least 3 people on each committee besides the chairperson. So we got, as I said, we got civic engagement, we got education, we got criminal justice, environmental, climate justice, economic development, and health. And if anyone is interested in one of those game changes, please email our Secretary Matlin Fairley and let her know. And our next membership meeting will be February the 20th, and the Education Committee will be presenting on Black History. February the 10th, there will be a documentary that will be presented on Pele Bates at the Ellenville Public Library. The time is to be announced, but I know it will be February the 10th. And our International Women's Day is to be held Saturday, March 23rd at the Ellenville Community Room at 11 a.m. But setup time for our members and officers is 9:45. We have to sit up. So I hope we get some participation, and we already got women's to honor for this International Women's Day. We're looking for a speaker now. And that's it. That's all the announcements that I got. And we thank our civic engagement for their presentation tonight, bringing on Rashida Tyler. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Night. Good night.
Night.